You talked earlier a little bit about Reuben Morgan. I want to revisit that again. Talk about someone who, if you weren't in the worship world or you're not a worship leader, you may not realize the breadth of songs that he has composed that the global
Yeah,
church sings.
yeah,
Did you like? So you talked about this guy with long hair coming in with his guitar. My understanding is that he's in the choir and God is in the house, and you
yeah. I think
guys.
he is.
I
Yeah,
think Steve McPherson led "I Give You My Heart," but I give you like we talked earlier about breakthrough songs. "I Give You My Heart," like that obviously was the song that opened the door,
yeah,
at least for him.
yep,
And then it just goes on and on after that. My Redeemer lives. Hear our praises. On and on to present day. Did,
yeah.
did you did you as a man who's probably a little bit older than him, did you see that in him, and did you have opportunity to encourage and call that out of him?
I don't. I'm not going to take credit for anything to do with Ruben. Uh, he's just amazing. He's a machine.
Hmm.
Um, uh, as a writer, like here's Darlene on one hand, the just the most amazing vocalist,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a great asset for her because she writes. Um, because she just writes as a singer,
Right.
Whereas Ruben's a singer, but not in the same way as Darlene,
Mm-hmm.
but just a poet, So yeah, man, he wrote some great songs and still does.
You do get a sense when you watch those videos that there's this uh, the metaphor that I see is like we're going to bring these young people up around us and we're going to put our hands on their back and we're going to support them and we're going to let them, live within their calling. Did you sense that through the albums that there would be people that would come up through the ranks and be like, yeah, that you're built for this. That you need to have
Oh,
opportunity. We want
definitely.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and people talk about uh, how you do that, how you make that happen. Uh, all I can say is that if you if in a church you have a great model of worship and commitment um, and you value the right things, if you do that, then people see that. The next generation sees that and goes, and the ones who have the calling on them go, I'm going to do that. And so you almost don't have to make it happen
Hmm.
because God will make it happen
Right.
using the people's calling yeah, and seeing the right. It's a culture. If the culture is right, the
Right.
culture is healthy, and the culture is good, then people are drawn into that culture in a good way.
Do you have any recollection of any songwriters or musicians during your tenure there that you were privileged to just support and come behind and say, "Hey, I want to get behind you. I want to create opportunity for you to whether it's being serving on our team or encouraging you in your songwriting."
Um, I think it just happened. I think it happened organically
Right.
in the way that things that are healthy grow.
Yeah.
So I, uh, I I'm not going to take credit for anybody else's
Hmm.
achievements. They all sacrifice. Miriam, like we talked about Miriam Webster.
Yeah.
She actually moved out of her bedroom into her garage, and the reason that she did that was that she she could play the piano at 3 o'clock in the morning and write songs to the Lord.
Wow.
She couldn't do that. She couldn't
In
do
her
that in
home.
the house. So she moved into her garage so that she could sing worship at any hour that she wanted to.
Hmm.
Like, who's taking credit for that? No one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just think having a good culture, and we didn't always get it right. I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes people had to push through.
Sure.
That's okay. And having the youth was great.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great place for people to learn to play and to lead worship and to write songs and that's all of those opportunities are important.
We were talking earlier about just like how the technology changed from album to album, and of course you had to have your foot in that world as a music director. Are
Yeah.
there, you mentioned a few things, overhead projection, ADAT tapes. Are there any other things that would maybe seem very foreign to us today now in our technological world that you were having to juggle because of where technology was in the 90s?
Oh, I can. I can't believe that we actually did some of these things. I mean, these. these ADAT machines, that was probably the epitome of technical craziness, like
Right.
you hit play on the multi-track machine and everything would lace up. So all these machines, like, think of them like VHS tape machines,
Hmm.
and you hear them all one by one. They all go zit, 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 all the way up through the rack, and then suddenly something would go wrong and they'd all spit out their tape.
Oh,
So then we'd all have to go
it's like a death sentence.
push them all back in again, and I think we need to call Elisa's, and we put them all back in again, and it's like just shake our heads and go, what are we doing? Some of those projects we had 200 tracks running on.
Wild. But
Just back in the day when you had no right to do that, you really, yeah,
by the time you got to the final project you were involved with, You Are My World, were you tracking anything? What was in your ears? What technology at that point were you using? And do you remember, was there a specific album where it was just like, with all due respect, I can tell that click wavers a little bit on some of the earlier records in tempo. Was there a
yeah.
time or a project or a moment that you remember that we're going to introduce this technology to keep us together?
Okay, so there were no in-ear monitors. I know this seems like
Archaic.
believable. The only person who had in-ear monitors was the drummer. So he literally had a drum machine, like a Roland Korg drum machine, sitting
Okay.
right beside him, a
Okay.
list of songs, a list of tempos, or maybe we programmed them. So you go song one, song two, song three, song four, and I don't think we ever clicked the worship songs back in those days, but we did click the praise songs, because if you get that wrong, then you're in big trouble.
Okay.
So so the um, so the each praise song, but the only person who had the click was the drummer. So we just literally had to follow the drummer, just like real musicians.
Cheeky, cheeky. And was that the case right up until You Are My World?
Yeah,
Wow. And nothing, everything is being played. Obviously, what we hear on the CD is layered post production, but in terms of if I was in the room, everything that I'm hearing would have been played or sounded live from the people on the platform. There's no tracks that.
yeah, no tracks, and we didn't add. I don't think we really added stuff. Maybe a little bit here and there. It
Hmm.
was more repair and rescue.
Yeah, repairing bunk notes. Somebody was bopping around during that. They went sharp, they went flat. Let's get that
Yeah, yeah.
again.
And
Yeah.
you're trying to, when you do the live album, you're trying to create an energy in the room, for everybody, but particularly the singers. You're trying to create a lifting energy, and that's not how you sing when you want to do when you're trying to do an album. So
Sure.
so you often go back and just sing it the way that you would have sung it if the people, if you weren't trying to lift the crowd, trying to lift.
Some of the circumstances under which y'all, recorded some of the songs too. I was reviewing Every Day from For This Cause.
Wow.
And again, you know what you see, and you can kind of put two and two together. But obviously, there was some kind of moment where Darlene must have invited a bunch of youth up on the platform,
Right.
and
Okay.
literally the whole platform is covered with people. There's no room to move at all, and you guys are doing a live album recording and cutting the track. So I imagine there must have been unique circumstances that you guys just had to adapt to.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. All the time. You never totally knew what was going to happen. And like I said, everything just happened all at once. You know, well, just everything happened all at once.
Right.
So everybody had to know their plan and execute it as best they could. I remember sometimes you just look at each other and laugh. You're like, oh, whoops.
So would you describe yourself, Russell? Like I don't know you. Would you describe yourself as a flexible person then, in light of everything you're talking about?
No,
No. So how did you like the Lord just increase your capacity? He must have.
you just have to do what you have to do.
Right.
I'm the arch preparer. So I'll prepare things as best I can
Sure.
so that there is a plan, um, and then we execute the plan. So
Right.
that's all it can be. and then if something goes squirrely, it went squirrely, and you
Yeah.
just have to laugh and go, yeah, okay.
Move on. Yeah.
And sometimes those squirrely things are they're the things that are the most fun, So, but yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to say that I'm flexible.
Let's roll through all the projects you did. And
uh,
I'm gonna name them. And should you have any memory or any thought or any anecdote, I want to invite you to share that. The
all right,
first one, most people, especially in America, are not going to be aware of because my understanding is that this was a studio thing, and I'm not sure it was distributed over here. Show Your Glory,
right.
Spirit and Truth, Volume 2, your first project with Hillsong. What do you remember?
Um, it was at the time the church was connected with a record company, just a small record company. Um, and I did I engineer on that project? Did I?
I think you produced or engineered it. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I did. I didn't do the mix, but I don't know. It's just like a kind of a 80s sounding, which is not surprising because it's kind of when it was done. Like a small project. Um, After that album, for me, it didn't capture worship,
Mm,
and I think a lot of people felt the same. So what happened after that album was I was talking to Chris Folsom. He
hmm.
and I we were good friends. Did a lot of things together, Youth Alives together,
Right.
I engineered one of his guitar projects, an album that I still love called For Dreamers Only. I
Mm,
think it's fabulous. What a creative guy. And
mm.
so anyway, he's saying, this is typical Chris. He's like, why do you bother with doing those stupid studio albums? Why don't you do a live album? That's what people want. And I said, what's all very well for you? You've got all these killer musicians and everything over there at Christian City Church. We're just like a suburban church. And do you think we could do it? And I really wanted him to say yes. And he said, yeah, of course you can. So then I went to Jeff and said, hey, Folsom says we should do a live album. And Jeff said, no, don't want to do that. So I just casually mentioned it in conversation to Brian, which is like that was the other naughty time. So, I went to Brian and said, yeah, you know, like it didn't matter. I said, yeah, yeah. Folsom says we should do a live album, but Jeff doesn't want to do it. So, and just kind of left it at that. And because Brian took it up and said, Christian City Church, do it. I'm not sure you should actually publish this. But and he said, yeah. He said, but those guys are good. Yeah. But Folsom says we can do it. So, and then from that moment on, there was no chance that we weren't doing it.
Right.
You know,
Talk
Brian's.
about the first one, The Power of Your Love.
Um, yeah, that was like a first. Can we do a live album?
Right.
Yeah, how do we do it? We got no
Learning.
budget. Can we actually make this happen? The world changed with that album. Wasn't a world changing album, but our world changed.
Right.
Prior to that, people were saying, why do you do what you do? After that, they said, how do you do what you do?
Stone's Been Rolled Away.
Yeah, and it's like the sophomore album. It's like, should we be doing an album every year? Do we have good songs to do it? Yeah, well, let's see.
Yeah, so the decision to do a record every single year, I guess Stone's Been Rolled Away would have been testing that theory.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
that a thought behind the scenes? Hey, let's do a project every year, or was it really initiated with like, okay, do we want to do a second one?
Um, I think with Brian being Brian, I think it it was inevitable. I think he
Right.
he championed it. He championed it and led us into it. Yeah,
Hmm. You have
yeah.
one song on that record, "Make Me Your Servant." Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Now you mention it, I do remember that song. One song. Yeah.
All right. People Just Like Us, 1994.
Okay, so the story of the song "People Just Like Us" was that I was at this stage I was music directing. What year was
Hmm.
it? Did you say
This is
94?
1994, July 1994. It was released,
So I was
recorded
music directing
February.
Youth
Yep.
Alive, which is funny because I was already like mid late 30s or something, and which doesn't sound very youthy. We had these girls who would dance. They were great dancers,
Hmm.
mostly saved.
Hmm.
And they were rehearsing their dance to a Janet Jackson song until we found a suitable song. And we couldn't find a suitable song. So I said, well, okay, I'll just write a 4 on the floor
Right.
groove for them to dance to. That's what that'll be. And and it'll suit Youth Alive, but nothing else, you know. And so we ended up doing it at Youth Alive with that song. I wrote 32 versions of the lyrics to try to get literally had 32 pieces of paper in a file
No way.
trying to write the
Wow.
lyrics of the song. Finally got to a point where, okay, I have to quit now because it's all about to happen. And I remember Darlene and Jeff saying, okay, we should do this song tomorrow in church. It's like, oh no, yeah, that's not even legal. You can't do this song in church. And but we did, and that kind of set me on the track of writing these praise songs, I guess.
And it obviously took off because they named the project. People just, they didn't name that project Shout to the Lord, although it has the first recording of Shout to the Lord on
Yeah, yeah. We all make mistakes.
it. Friends in High Places.
Yeah. Kind of like we're starting to find our groove now, you know,
Yep.
starting to figure out what we're supposed to be doing.
Yep. Yep. And again with the clever lyrics, my God cares too much to say. His mercies are new every day. I get down to pray, and then help is on its way. Love it. I love it.
Well, thanks. You know, as I think I confuse a lot of people, but you know, that's a lot of words to sing too, aren't there? Yeah.
It,
Like, you
it,
see people kind of going. The thing with clever lyrics is sometimes it takes people out of that affective domain into the processing, and you know,
Yeah, no, I love it, and I loved that it communicated in a praise song
right,
the transcendence of Christ, that he's our friend. You
right,
know, at that point, I'm not sure like we had those in ballads, but I'm not sure in a fast, upbeat song that we were
right.
saying those things to God in that particular way.
Yeah. And again, it's that the story so far philosophy. Whereas, like, how many things can you remind people of before we get
Right,
to worship? You know,
right. And then also on that project, so you open the project with one of your songs, and the project closes with "I Can't Wait," which is, I remember back in the day, I'm like, hey, like it says a lot if you can write a praise song just with two chords like that. That is like Harry Nilsson coconut level, you know,
yeah, right,
that
right,
just like a couple of chords in the whole entire song. But yeah, another great fast, underrated praise song from the early days of Hillsong. I
right.
can't
Yeah,
wait.
we might have done that. I remember going into the Hillsong conference that year. We did that song, like, but there was a mini conference right before Hillsong
Okay.
of pastors, and then we
Yeah.
went into, and then we had the services all weekend. We did that song 30 something times between a Friday night and before the conference started. And the band this literally happened. The drummer said, I'm not playing that song. I'm just not playing that song.
He had it. He was done.
Yeah, yeah. He's like, I played that song so many times. He was probably exhausted, and his shins were probably killing him. And I said, we don't have a choice. The boss said, you know,
Yeah.
it was Brian calling it, you know. So we weren't placing the song. It was Brian saying, let's do that. I can't wait song, you know. So we're doing it again. You know, it was like 30 something times between the Friday night and before we started the
It's
conference.
insane.
Yeah.
And on the project, I think that's, you'd mentioned Lucy Fisher, and I think she leads it on that project. And just again, going back to what we were talking about, just unashamedly gospel from
Yeah.
beginning to end, just
Yeah.
leaning hard into those instincts. Okay, so Friends in High Places, I think that was the last project that Jeff was involved with. Now you're at the helm with Darlene. God is in the house.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. I think probably us finding our, finding our new pattern, you know, which,
Mm-hmm.
um, kind of splitting the duties and pulling them together and cooperating. You know, I mean, she's really, really great at what she does. You know, and so it wasn't hard. You know, it felt comfortable. You know.
Yeah.
Mm.
And also an increase in your songs being used. Obviously, you're probably, intentional or not, there's a void. Jeff has left,
Yeah,
and I'm looking at the track listing here. God is in the house, joy in the Holy Ghost. My heart sings praises, and that my soul knows very well, which is a beautiful, beautiful song. If people listen to
so
this haven't
Darlene,
seen
was
it,
it? Yes, my
that
son
was
was.
with Darlene. Yep.
Okay, so what happened there? I think this is the song Brian said. Um, said you have to do a new song on Sunday for communion, otherwise you're fired. You know, which is like Darlene's way of motivating you. It's like we kind of went, oh, he's pretty serious. So I went to the studio. She went to home or her office or something, and we both tried to write. We came, we saw each other on the way out of the building on a Friday night, and I said, "Have you got a song?" And she goes, "No, I just got a half a song." And I said, "Same here." It couldn't be, could it? So
They went together. Wow. I heard a similar story. I don't know what's jogging my brain. I couldn't tell you who told me this, but I want to say that there's a similar story with Marty and Joel's "To the Ends of this Earth,"
okay.
to the ends of the earth. I want to say that I heard that from maybe at a conference one year that it was. But isn't that interesting how it happens? And so, was
Yeah.
your part the verse or the chorus? Do you
Uh,
remember?
I
I
don't
think the
remember.
chorus is "When mountains fall, I'll stand by the power of your hand.
What was the verse? Do you remember the
You
verse?
make a da 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 that my soul knows
That sounds
very
more
well."
Darlene. If I had to guess, I'd say that sounds more Darlene, and the chorus
Okay.
sounds more me, but I don't know.
I love how I'm singing your songs back to you. And
Yeah, yeah. I love that you know them better than I do. Someone actually asked me one time, "What songs did you write?" And I couldn't remember. I could remember like three, and
right.
so I had to Google myself to find out what songs I wrote.
Oh, it's so funny. And then a couple more here that you wrote. Your people sing praises. I believe the promise. Um,
Okay.
Now, when I see "I Believe the Promise," it makes me think of the "Shout to the Lord" album. Quick question going back to that project. I know we talked about it once already, but how were those songs chosen? Because the life cycle of songs, you guys probably weren't regularly singing. Well, maybe, like, obviously "Shout to the Lord" probably felt like a bit of a throwback. Did Integrity ask you to go and say, "Hey, give us like the greatest hits of what you guys have done up until now"?
For the Shout to the Lord album, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it was half new songs, half it was like hits and memories. Yeah,
hits and memories. Okay,
yeah.
cool. So after God is in the house, all things are possible. My mom's favorite record that you guys
Cool.
did. What are your memories of that project?
Um, uh, you know what happened to me? That the first few albums, I kind of held everything in my head. You hear the song so many times and you played them so much, it all stayed in my head. And then there came a point where it just critically all collapsed and all the details disappeared. And that's around that time that I don't really,
Have memory, yeah.
it kind of all fell into a blur somewhere around there. This is us doing what we do. And I think one thing that we realized was that people would say, "Oh, what are you going to do to make next year's album better?" And we had no plan. Our plan was always, let's just make Sunday better, and
Right.
hopefully in the process we'll get better. And
Gotcha.
yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah, it was all we
Th-
knew.
There's there's a couple of songs that are off of that record. Let me see if I can bring some of them up, and that might jog your memory a little bit.
Maybe so.
Um, so again, I don't know. I don't have the credits in front of me. I think I know. You Can't Stop Talking and the Love of God Can Do, which I think was one of the few songs that you wrote with your wife. Do you remember? Do you remember the story behind that one?
I probably needed help.
Help.
Yeah,
Um, I'm trying to see what else is on here.
yeah. Wives are great for that. Yeah, they're going to believe in you, whatever happens.
Right,
Um,
right.
and tell you the truth, and but know that you need support. Yeah, so yeah.
Love You So Much was on this record, and I do remember
Oh,
this song being sung a lot in the church that I grew up in. In fact, I have it queued here. Can I play just a quick clip?
yep.
Okay, this is from All Things Are Possible. Love You So Much.
I love you, my soul sings in your presence, carried on your wings. I love you so much, Jesus. I love you so much. How my soul longs for you, longs to worship you forever in your power and majesty.
What a beautiful melody, Russell, that you wrote on that one. And I wish you could see the video that I'm seeing. There's a kids choir singing along
Oh,
with
okay.
that. I don't know if
I
you
was
remember
just
that.
listening to that, thinking the vocals on that are so beautiful. It's
Yeah,
really good, aren't they? So what happened with that song? So I'm writing all of these crazy four on the floor
yeah.
gospel
Hmm.
praise R&B praise songs, and I thought I can write a worship song. I'm a worshiper, so I wrote that song,
Right.
and literally put it on the shelf, top shelf in my office, and
Hmm.
it just piece of paper just sat there,
Hmm.
And, came a Sunday, came a week a meeting, and someone said, "Hey, we really need a new praise song for Sunday. What have we got?" And no one had anything. There's Darlene and Ruben and all the usual suspects. And no, I said, "Well, I've got one." And they just looked at me like, "You're joking. You don't write praise songs." They didn't say that, but you could just like, really? I said, "Yeah, yeah." That was, well, how's it go? So I just went next door, grabbed my guitar, and played them the song, and then someone said, "Yeah, has anyone else got a song like that?" And so we didn't do it, and I literally put it back on the shelf.
Hmm.
The same scenario happened 6 months later. I said, "Has anybody got a song? We're desperate." And I said, "Well, I've got that one I showed you before because I like the song. Like for me, it was a heart
Yeah.
song. And so they and literally the conversation went, I guess if we have to, like, there's no other song. If so, but it didn't hurt me because I felt like this song had weight.
Yeah, it needed the right time for it to, and not only is it used that Sunday, but it's put on the project. So
Yeah, and I
that's
think part of
the
it was the fact that I sang it. I mean, if Darlene had sung it, that people would have got it.
yeah.
So yeah,
Speak to that really quick, just about the importance of a demo, and maybe talk to us about. We talked earlier about how songs were pitched. Were they always pitched live? And what advice would you give to songwriters in terms of pitching their songs, having a demo, all that type of stuff?
we mostly did it live. My way of writing was I used Cubase, and because I just for my own process, I had to know the horn parts
Right.
and had to know the drum feels and all of that. So I tended to make a demo. Most people didn't. Ruben would just come with a guitar. Darlene would just play it on the piano or whatever. I don't think I was probably the only one who did that I remember anyway. Who really did a demo. So these days demos are, but we were just a closed group. So um, we were just listening for the song, so it made sense there. But these days, I would probably always do a demo. Um,
Do you think songs have a better chance of being accepted when they're nailing out, is this a guy song or is this a female song, and whose vocal is put on it? As a songwriter, I sometimes feel like I'm limited by my constraints as a moderate singer, but I have a vision for the song and I can hear it and
yeah,
I can
yeah,
see it in my brain and I can be like, if the right voice is on it, but
yeah,
building that bridge between the people that you got to bring along with you is sometimes
yeah.
a challenge, right?
Like even recording companies will say the demo doesn't matter. We can hear the song, but they can't.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter how much you say that.
Hmm.
It's you got to be pretty special to actually hear a good song in a bad demo or in a live demo.
Hmm. Hmm.
Remember years ago, there's a songwriter in England, a guy called Tom Springfield,
Hmm.
pop songs. Uh, and they said he would just come into the record company, bring his guitar, pull a crumpled up piece of paper out of his pocket, kind of smooth it out on the desk and do the song. And people would go, "That's a great song." But the, those days, I mean, you, these days production is such a part of the song
Right.
that I think it's pretty hard to do that.
Right. Right. Next album was Touching Heaven, Changing Earth. And we watched, or pardon me, listened to a clip of That's What We Came Here For earlier. What else do you remember about that project?
I just think it was just us developing still, just finding new songs, finding who the songwriters were.
Hmm.
Um, trying to keep it fresh and everything, So yeah, just a great song by Darlene,
Another couple of songs off this project, "Church on Fire." Uh, Ho-
Scared a kid in Sunday school because he thought the church was on fire. Yeah, that truly happened.
um, "Holy Spirit Rain Down," which
Okay.
we talked about earlier. Beautiful song. And
So that song there, we used to have a late great service,
mhm.
which was like I think it started at 8 o'clock at night on a
Mm,
Sunday night. So
mhm.
we were all exhausted, and so I would always play at the late great. But anyway, they couldn't find anyone to worship lead, so they said, "Would you lead worship at the late great service?" Only time I ever led worship that I recall
Hmm.
at Hillsong, and I said, "Okay." But if I'm going to do it, I think in my head I'm going to do it with a new song.
Yeah.
And I told you the process of writing Holy Spirit Rain Down.
Right.
So we were moving house at the time, and my wife is carrying boxes back and forward past the dining table as I'm trying to finish this song. We did that. Um, yeah, she's kind of looking at me like, "Can you be a helpful husband?" and, I'm doing my best. So we did this song that night. I was literally the only person in the place who knew it. There are no lyrics for it. There was nothing. Nobody else had heard this song, I'm a moderate singer. So we did that, and just heaven broke out.
Wow.
So I remember Brian was going home. Brian was leaving as that service happened. He just heard all this roar just heard this roar happening. It was, what's going on here? It
Wow.
was fun.
Hmm. Yes and amen. Another lightning fat. Again, I don't know what you
Uh,
were drinking for coffee those years in
uh,
97, 98.
yeah, I'm not responsible.
But another great praise song, and then "My Greatest Love Is You."
Yeah, yeah. I love that song.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like personally, it's
Hmm.
a heart song for me.
"By Your Side" came out in 1999.
Ah,
Great in Power. We already talked about Great in Power.
but this time
Um,
I knew that I was leaving. I knew that I was transitioning out.
Interesting. And
Yes.
tell me about that. What did you know? Like what gave you that sense?
I think I think that with the young guys coming on and doing so great, all the United guys, the young guys, I thought, "Yeah, I can keep putting my stamp on this, but they need to put their stamp on it,
Right.
and out of respect, they would let me do it, but I, I just needed to create space for them, and also as our world got bigger at Hillsong, um, part of my uh, toolbox is that I know music, I
Mm-hmm.
know theory,
Mm-hmm.
and I know recording, and I know all of that. So as things got bigger,
Mm-hmm.
um, more and more people were involved in the creative side, and fewer on and but so I was tending to end up back in the the music theory recording mechanical side,
Right.
but that wasn't all of me,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm a songwriter as well,
Mm-hmm.
so that part of the world is shrinking for me,
Mm. Right.
and so I just, what, for this to be healthy, to stay healthy, I need to be not here. So and I knew it was coming.
There's a great humility in that I
uh,
appreciate.
I'm not saying I liked it, but sometimes it's like taking your medicine. Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do.
Yeah.
One of the executive pastor at church was an American, lived all of his life in Australia, but he moved back to America, Virginia Beach, and he called me one day and said, "Hey, can you make a trip over here and just look at my worship team and tell me what I've got?" So I said, "Yeah, of course I can." So I jumped on a plane and came over and got to know the guys. They're all still great, dear friends of mine. And and we but as I walked into the building, as I walked around the building, I thought, I'm supposed to be here.
Wow.
I just knew I was supposed to be there. So
Wow.
then came that awkward process of telling Brian, "Hey, I think I'm transitioning away," um, and so that change that had to happen. Yeah,
Wow.
it was good, but I must admit, every now and then I say people would think I had the perfect job for a worship musician, but Brian had this saying that often occurs to me. He said, "Everything is a season. There's nothing, but there's nothing to say it can't be a long season.
Right.
And for it to be a long season, you've got to keep things have to keep changing. If things don't make little changes, if churches or worship teams or worship ministries don't make little changes all the time, then eventually comes a point where they have to make a big transition, a big change. That's very painful. The many little transitions, if you normalize change as you go, then it's actually easier and it's kind of fun, you know.
Yeah, that's really wise. So, did you transition out at this point and come back for this cause and You Are My World, or were you still on staff up
I
until You Are
was,
My?
yeah, I was on staff, I think 50% of the time. At this stage, I was traveling around a lot, doing seminars and helping teams and stuff like that. So I was there 50/50. I said to them, look, I'll be here for every project
Right.
and, and half the Sundays in the year. I was actually there a lot more than that, but that was my guarantee. I said the rest
Yeah.
of the time I travel. And then my youngest daughter, Kimmy,
Mm-hmm.
uh, she wasn't coping with me being away a lot.
Hmm.
Um, so I basically stopped traveling, you know,
Hmm.
and I was just at church a lot, and so I was in that transition period. You know, it was a good time. It sounds like a bad time, but it was actually a really good time. You know.
Before we talk about For This Cause, I want to play again one of my favorite songs by you. We were talking about this the other night. We were texting back and forth. This is I Simply Live for You.
The glory of your presence now fills this place. In worship we will meet you face to face. There is nothing in this world to which you can be compared. Glory of glory, praise upon praise. You bind the broken hearted and save all my tears. By your word you set the captives free. There is nothing in this world that you cannot do. I simply live for you.
I think that was your the final song that you contributed to a Hillsong project, and what a great
It was,
song.
it was definitely my exiting song. You know,
Yeah.
it's like um, just writing out my heart. You know, it's like um, leaving all of this. This leaving Hillsong and all the people that I loved and all of that to really do what I knew God was calling me to do next. And
Right.
yeah, so
What did that feel like in that? What do you remember about that album recording and being a part of that?
I remember Darlene being very pregnant, and, and I remember thinking how brave she was doing this project. Um, and I remember, I think consciously trying to help other people take up the reins
Yeah.
at that stage. Yeah,
Who was coming up behind you? Was it Ray Badham? Who
yeah,
were the
yeah. All
people?
of those guys. Yeah, Ray and Ruben. I guess they were the guys who were in those projects as opposed to the United project so much. Reuben was, um, but they were and Ray is a very capable, very well educated musician and great guy. You know, really great person, and so yeah, it needed him.
And then the final project that you were a part of, You Are My World. What do you remember about going back for that? Probably knowing at that time that your life was gonna, and we'll talk about that in a second, but that your life was gonna be changing radically. What do you remember about You Are My World?
I, I don't have a clear recollection, to be honest. But this stage, I think I was. I know it sounds like I was leaving for a long time, but it's but I did. You know, it was like
Mm-hmm.
it was firstly me, I knew, then my family knew, and then Brian knew, and then eventually Darlene knew, and so it feels like the last thing I wanted to do was leave and leave a hole. I wanted to leave it healthy, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah. And
mm,
the credits say that you were a producer on that project too. You Were My World. This was the project with Marty Sampson's God Is Great, Mark Stevens' All of My Days, Emmanuel, Irresistible, You Were My World, of course, Everything That Has Breath, Worthy Is the Lamb, which became another one
yeah,
of Darlene's monster songs.
great songs. Yeah,
Yeah, fantastic.
but you can see, you know, the transition is happening.
Yeah.
So away from me, you know, and it was good, you know,
Mm.
it's a good thing.
When you look back, and forgive me, it's the inevitable question anytime we're talking about stuff like this, but when you look back, favorite song of yours, favorite project of yours? I know it's like trying to choose between kids, but and I'm sure they're favorites for different reasons, but is there a project that you're just like, oh man, yeah, that project I really do have fond memories and I like that one the best. I thought we were really onto something.
I think I enjoyed the ones where I had songs on them. I know it probably sounds wrong, but you know, when you write a song, that's you have an investment, and then to hear all the people singing those songs, you know, hear the
Sure.
band do them and hear them sing. That's incredibly fulfilling. I always feel like songwriting. I, I start, I feel like I'm horrible at this. I'd never write another song. I'm hopeless.
Right.
I'm useless. I can't do this. And then suddenly it's like, oh, this could be a song. And then you do it for church, and if church embraces it and it helps, it does something for church. That's a great feeling. But you do it on an album, and you just you just that's incredibly fulfilling. For me personally, I think "Love You So Much." You know,
Yeah.
I remember I told you the first part of "Love You," the story about "Love You So Much." I was in South Africa. I was in a church, I think in Stellenbosch or somewhere there, and there's a church that spoke Afrikaans. I don't speak Afrikaans. I barely speak English, and so they they say, but a friend got me. He said, "Go there. You need to go there." So I went there, and they speak everything's in Afrikaans. So I don't have any idea. And I hear "itty bitty flip de doody Russell Fragar." So I thought, if there's a long gap, that means I've got to get up and sing now, because no one's
Mm.
telling me anything. So, and there was a long gap, so I got up and sang. So, and that church said, "We've never heard of Hillsong. We don't know why you're here. We don't know any of your songs, but we're only here because your friend said you should be here." Okay,
Mm.
well, okay. So then I got up, and the worship pastor had never heard any Hillsongs.
Mm.
The choir had never heard any Hillsong. They had a good choir. The pastor never heard any Hillsong. So I started out. I said, I'm going to go brave here. I did shout to the Lord. All the people sang shout to the Lord. Then I did "Love You So Much," and all the people in the church, "You love you so much." The worship
Mm.
pastor, the choir, the pastor had never heard of any of these songs, but all the people just knew the songs and sang them. It was the most amazing
Wow.
feeling. That was like this realization for me that these songs actually touched other people.
Yeah.
And I must admit, I turned to the pastor and just smiled and nodded.
Russell, did you ever have the experience at Hillsong where you heard one of your songs being sung to the Lord, but obviously if you're up on the platform hearing it back the first time, and just instantly the church was leaning in, like almost in a way that you're like you could have been singing it for 6 months prior to that. They just got it and they leaned in. Did you ever have that experience with one
Probably
of your
Holy Spirit
songs?
rain down was a little bit like that.
Yeah.
It's a bit. Most times, churches. This is a hard thing for songwriters. You do a song and everybody just looks at you because they've never heard it before, which is reasonable. These days, like we do a lot of at our church, we cover a lot of other people's songs. They've
Hmm.
heard them on radio, so they actually know the songs.
Right.
And also you benefit from all of their post producing and all of their tracks and everything like that. When you do a song of your own or from your own worship team, you've got to be prepared for that to be a lot harder, a lot longer process. It is a much harder thing to do. That's why so few people do it, I guess.
Yeah.
It doesn't come easily. I do remember one time. This is at a Hillsong conference, and we did People Just Like Us,
Mm-hmm.
and I just stopped playing in the middle of it because I just like there's the places, places full of crazy worship people for a start, so they're there, they're going to have a party whatever happens,
Sure.
and the horn section's playing, the band's playing great. And I just stood there and folded my arms and thought, this is the most amazing feeling, just to
You
see
took it all in.
yeah, I just took it all in because I thought
Yeah.
this is what I've always been trying to do,
Right. It's fantastic.
and here it is.
Russell, you started sharing a little bit of just feeling the Lord tugging on your heart, and you eventually immigrated, and you live today in
Yeah,
Virginia, 3 hours north of where I'm at here.
yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your transition out of Hillsong in 2001, and not what only led you to that decision, but your decision to come live here in Virginia permanently?
Well, to be honest, we didn't know if it was going to be permanent or not. We didn't know if in a month this is a disaster, we'll just move back.
Mm.
So I remember being on the plane thinking, if we make it a year, because a lot of people migrating, especially people in praise and worship, migrating to America, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out. But it did for us. America has always been incredibly gracious towards Hillsong, and finally, then to me, I never. If I thought of myself living somewhere else, it wouldn't have been in America, because I always thought America's got like such skillful musicians and great writers and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I'd end up somewhere where that didn't happen.
Right.
But God had a different idea. My wife always knew we'd end up in America. It's funny.
Interesting.
Yeah, like from when we were married, So, how did that happen? I think that just the feeling. I think the first thing that we knew was we were leaving Hillsong,
Mm-hmm.
not badly, but we just need to make room here. And then where do we go? I don't know. Let's just see. And then with Steve Kelly saying, "Come over and check it out,"
Right.
to help me know what I've got, and then me walking the building and feeling like I think I was supposed to be here. It was such a wonderful time that when we first
Mm-hmm.
moved over, I could be all the other bits of me that I didn't get a chance to really do at Hillsong.
Mm-hmm.
I could do all of that, and it was fun.
And that would have been the Wave Church, right, in Virginia
yeah,
Beach.
yeah.
And how
So,
long were you there, and what was your role there?
I was the worship pastor. We were there 5 years, and then we moved there right before 9/11 happened.
Ah,
So it doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but immigration just became a mess after that. And so we had a 5-year visa. We tried to get a green card. It took us 20 years to get a green card. So like, you know the story, right?
15 years for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint-hearted.
No.
And so our visa ran out. We had to move back to Australia I think we're back there for 10 months.
Really?
In limbo, yeah. And then got another. I had a few churches ask me if I'd come and talk to them. I did a trip over here just to look, and it's like, I don't belong there. I don't belong there. I believe, and then I discovered, I think I belong in this church in Northern
Russell,
Virginia.
your faith must have been so strong to have to go back to Australia. Yet still,
Well, if you don't go back, they throw you out. So
you had no. Well, there's a lot of people here, as you know, that will live here illegally. But your faith had to be so
I didn't know
strong.
that was an option. All right.
But your faith had to be so strong to know that you were still going to come back, and that
Well, I didn't know if we would come back. I
Okay.
think we knew we had to not be there, and I don't think we knew what would happen. But it just became very obvious moving back to Australia for 10 months. There was nothing there for us. That this wasn't where we were supposed to be.
Interesting.
We didn't fit anywhere, So, and we definitely tried, but
Interesting.
yeah. So it must be America, and then America opened the door again. Praise God, So
Yeah.
yeah.
What were some of the challenges working at a mega church that had a worldwide influence on church culture? Let me ask this another way. dangerous question.
Right?
What are some of the greatest misconceptions about you and the ministry that you had to face?
Um, I'm not sure I had any preconceptions really. Um, when we went to Hillsong, it wasn't a mega church at all. It was just a couple of hundred people. So it wasn't like we arrived in the middle of something big. We arrived in the middle of something with big potential.
Hmm.
And then, so I think people misunderstand how church, what it takes to make a church work.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you have to make a lot of decisions, and you have to make a lot of good decisions to make a church healthy and functional. People, your leaders of churches often that we call them pastors, senior pastors, but
Mm-hmm.
they're often not pastors. They're often by gifting. They're often leaders. And if you read the New Testament, it wasn't pastors leading the church. It was leaders leading the church.
Hmm.
And so you have to have leaders, and sometimes leaders have to do and say things that don't feel very comfortable. But that's never been any different. It's always been like that. So I think, and then I think there are traps that churches fall into.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to, you've got to keep the main thing always, and that's not easy to do. You've got
Mm-hmm.
to keep, you got to keep the right things, love of God. It's easy to get seduced into church growth.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is healthy things grow. You can't
Yeah.
stop it. There's nothing wrong with being a big church. All it means is you're a church that a lot of people want to go to.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it happens, you've got to make sure that it's the church that Jesus wants to go to as well. So
It's a
if
good
that makes
word.
sense.
What is some of the greatest advice as we wrap up? You're a talented songwriter, you're a gifted keyboard player, music director. What is some of the top advice that you give to aspiring songwriters?
Songwriters or broader?
Let's just talk songwriters first, and then where I'm going with this, I'll go
Okay.
to the music direction side. But let's start with songwriting. What are some of the Russell Fragar top tips when it comes to writing for? I'm making it sound so academic, but writing
Yeah,
for
no,
church.
I think you've got to. I think for church, saying for church is like the key thing for me. I think one of the things these days that people write, there are so many great songs written, and people are stretching to try to be creative and keep things moving forwards. We just got to keep making sure that people can actually sing these songs, people can actually capture them, and that we used to call them the domestic engineers and financial consultants. Can the domestic engineers and financial consultants sing this song, or are they going to be left as a bystander? So I think Tomlin is the master of it. Chris
Hmm.
Tomlin just wrote songs that anybody could sing, and they're great songs.
Right.
So yeah, I just um, you know I think write songs that help people. Our job is to make worship inevitable, to make it easy for
Yeah.
people who aren't good at this to actually enter in. So if you can do that, then that's a that's a great thing. Figure out who you are, and um, find out who your encouragers are, because there's a lot of discouragement that happens,
Yeah.
just naturally. I mean, most of it comes from in your own head. There's a voice in your head when you're trying to write songs that says, no, 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 this will never work. This is not good enough. And you've got to be able to push back. Well, yeah, but it will be, and
Right.
then find the people who will tell you when you're doing well, and when you need to keep trying. So
Yeah, yeah, amen to that. And if I might be so bold to add to that advice,
yeah,
find the people who can take the idea that you have to make it what it needs to be, and
yeah,
surround yourself with people that, sure, maybe the idea isn't fully developed, but God has designed us to live in community, and maybe the whole reason why you have, just to your point of the song, and that my soul knows very well, maybe you have the verse, but maybe someone else has the chorus,
yeah,
and the beauty of that is that we're coming together and living in community to finish it.
yeah. I believe that completely. And I also have to say, I'm not a very good co-writer. I don't know why that is. I think I have to go, for me to write, I have to go into kind of a very inner place in me.
Hmm.
And then there's probably not a place you can take other people. So Um, yeah. So I've never mastered the art of being a great co-writer at all. I don't think I've mastered the art of being a great writer, but I don't think I've mastered the art of being a strong co-writer. So other people can probably answer that question much better than I can. I would like to be, but I'm not, so.
Do you occasionally pull out some of the songs that you wrote while at Hillsong Church and lead them over here in your local church? I'm sure you're asked when you go to speaking functions, sing this, this song that you may or may not be known for. But in terms of your local church, have you drawn back on your catalog occasionally?
It would be very occasionally,
Yeah.
It's not a whole lot. I honestly think if you want to keep being relevant, have to. The future is forwards, not backwards. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what you think. The future, you can't reach the future by going backwards. You can only reach it by going forwards. And forwards is always difficult. It's always much more. It's so easy to go backwards, but it's the fruit is in going forward. So I think you got to keep on trying to do that.
And your advice for people that are music directors, band directors, some of your greatest advice.
Okay, firstly, it's a people job. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, try to get good at people, get good at
Mm-hmm.
doing people. And honestly, you can make every mistake under the sun, but well, no, you can make a lot of mistakes. And but if you love people, you'll survive.
Yeah.
You've got to genuinely
Yeah.
love people, and that love for people comes from God. It's not natural to me,
Yeah.
but in God it is very natural. I love our worship team there. I love them so much, and whether they're great or not good doesn't make any difference to me. It's like I just love them and appreciate them, and that is just a God thing. And then you've got to give God something to work with. So if you can be a better player, if you can be a better singer, if you can know more about music, then uh, whatever you can do, give God handles, give God something that He can work with. The more you give Him to work with, the more He can do with you.
Hmm. That's good. As you consider your tenure at Hillsong and the platform that the Lord entrusted you with, which was really remarkable in what God did and what God continues to do with the music out of Hillsong Church, what life lessons did you learn that you think are critical for other worship leaders to grasp in order to have longevity in ministry?
I think you've got to be willing to, like we just said, you've got to be willing to move forwards, keep moving forwards, to
Mm-hmm.
embrace things that most people embrace things that you don't know. Like a lot of people will say, I don't know much about music, but I know what I like, But
Mm-hmm.
in reality, we like what we know. It's the other way around. And so
Mm.
you've got to, I mean, I have things that I'm comfortable with, but I have to become comfortable with other things too. So you just you if you learn to know other people's music, then you learn to love it. So I think you've got to do that. I
How do you
think
how do you shepherd people in that direction?
I think hmm, I think part of it's example. Like I'm 68 years old, and I think if I love things that are new, that gives other people permission. Like we have older people my age in our church, who, truth be known, they would really love the music to return to the 70s, 70s music. That's what they would love. But the funny thing is, if we do with authenticity, if we do current new songs with authenticity in church, eventually they start to love that too.
Hmm.
And I think you just got to be a good example of someone um, who's willing to keep moving.
Yeah.
Everything changes.
That's an interesting comment that authenticity is what kind of brings people along.
Oh,
I think
totally.
there's some good wisdom there.
Yeah, it's totally true. Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up, man, I've enjoyed this. Thank you for giving so much of your time, Russell.
Oh no, it's my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for asking me. I didn't think anybody cared what I thought, so it's good.
I'm fascinated by it all. Tell us how we can be praying for you these days. What should we know about family updates, and how we can just be encouraging you for those who might be watching this?
Yeah. Well, we I'm a country boy, so both my grandfathers were dairy farmers, so we live out here in the country, and the church is 55 miles from our front door. So it's yeah, because it's a not inner city, but it's a inner suburb, if you like.
You drive 55 miles to
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
Wow.
But I don't do it every day. These are like a
Okay.
lot of people. I work a lot from home, and
Hmm.
then, but to be honest, most weeks I'm in there 4 days a week. So yeah, and it's like a crazy, like, how did that happen? It just kind of happened, and what are you going to do? It's God's plan, and we love it. So
That sounds like an introvert's dream. A 55 commute twice a day with with the radio off and just my thoughts.
kind of is. um, uh, yeah, I'm definitely not. I'm definitely a country boy, and we we live on 4 acres out here, surrounded by a cattle farm and a corn farm,
Mm.
cornfields on the other side, and so when I'll be working for a few hours, making tracks or doing whatever, and just go for a walk out the back and talk to the Lord, and it's pretty great. So
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll let me do it. I don't know how long they'll let me do it, but whatever they'll let me do it, I'll keep doing it. So church is going great. It is our church is Word of Life um, International Church in Springfield, Virginia, and it is the most, without a doubt, it's the most multicultural, multi-language environment I've ever seen. Um, Everybody, I remember last Easter we had services. Obviously, we took a photo of us at the end because we were so pleased to be together, and someone pointed out everybody in that photograph came from a different place.
Wow.
Like they might have been born here, but their parents immigrated from another country, and all over the world. I mean, there's I don't know, there's maybe 100 different countries represented in our church. I don't know what most of them are saying most of the time. They're talking in another language, so
Hmm.
I need to learn Spanish.
Me too.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, so it's and it's I think I have the ability to kind of I think I kind of my ability set is kind of works for getting things going.
Yeah.
So yeah, so pray for us. We're doing great and growing fast, like, yeah. So yeah,
It's great.
yeah.
Russell, I've deeply, deeply enjoyed this, and I know we'll talk for a few minutes after I click the stop button on here, but I just wanted to thank you on behalf of myself and behalf of those watching for just all the beautiful music that you have equipped the church, the prayers that you've put into our hearts, into our minds, that we've been able to pray and sing back to the Lord, and just the contributions that you've made that have been truly, truly inspiring. And I know that that's not about you, but it's about Jesus Christ and building His kingdom. And I'm just so thankful for the way that you've influenced me in my ministry, and certainly others as well, to keep our eyes on Jesus Christ and to continue to build His kingdom. So thank you so much for being willing to
Thank
go
you.
down memory lane.
Yeah, yeah. It totally was for me. You surprised me. You played things. I think, oh my goodness, I forgot all these things I forgot about. It was kind of really lovely to be reminded of them and
Hmm.
remember some great, great times. And honestly, it's I know we worked very, very hard at Hillsong, but it was an incredible privilege, as it is now. It's just an amazing privilege. We have as worship people, we have this unique position. Everyone else, when they gets to heaven, evangelists, teachers,
Hmm.
preachers, everybody else, when they get to heaven, has to change job.
Yeah.
We don't. The worship team, it's the
So
one thing
good.
that we know that we'll do in heaven. So
Hmm.
what a privilege we have, and that's I don't deserve it, but
Hmm.
I'm grateful.
Hmm.
Thanks for talking to me.
My pleasure, Russell. God bless you. We'll talk soon.